Darren Holt thought it was just another routine call, but the shoplifter he confronted, Victor Lane, armed and desperate, would turn a quiet night into a violent chase that left an entire town gripped with fear. The evening was calm, the kind of night when nothing extraordinary was expected to happen. The convenience store sat on the corner of a quiet street, its neon lights flickering faintly against the glass windows. Inside, the soft hum of refrigerators mixed with the faint buzz of an overhead light, creating the familiar background of an ordinary shift. The clerk behind the counter, tired but alert, had seen it all before. People rushing in to grab cigarettes, kids picking up snacks, workers stopping by for a late-night drink. Nothing about the night felt unusual until a man stepped inside and shifted the rhythm of the room. He moved quickly, glancing around with restless eyes that avoided meeting anyone else's. His steps were sharp, his shoulders stiff, his movements almost too deliberate. At first he looked like another customer in a hurry, but as he made his way down the aisles, the clerk's attention sharpened. The man wasn't browsing. He was grabbing. Energy drinks, packs of jerky, bottles of liquor. Items disappeared into his backpack in a matter of seconds. He worked with the speed of someone who had done this before, his hands confident and practiced. Shoplifting wasn't new to the clerk. He had filed reports, spoken to officers, and even chased down kids who thought stealing candy was a game. But this man carried himself differently. He didn't fumble or hesitate, and he didn't look nervous in the way most shoplifters did. There was a steadiness to his actions, as though he had already calculated every second. What unsettled the clerk most was the way the man's jacket shifted unnaturally when he bent forward. It wasn't the weight of snacks or drinks. It was heavier, bulkier. When the man pulled his jacket tighter around his chest, the truth became clear. A sharp outline pressed against the fabric, the unmistakable shape of a weapon tucked out of sight. The discovery changed everything. This wasn't just a petty theft. The man wasn't worried about the police or about being caught. He had come prepared for confrontation. The clerk's throat tightened as his hand brushed against the counter, quietly triggering the silent alarm. The button was small, almost hidden, but its signal traveled instantly to the local police station. Seconds dragged by with the tension of hours. The thief zipped his bag, slung it over one shoulder, and strode toward the front of the store. Each step was heavy, each glance sharp. He seemed to sense that eyes were on him, that suspicion was creeping in, yet he didn't slow down. His pace was steady, defiant even. Customers coming in through the doors brushed past him, unaware that danger walked within inches of them. In the distance, faint sirens began to wail, cutting through the silence of the night. The suspect paused at the threshold, his jaw tightening, his hand hovering close to his jacket. He knew what was coming. The moment the alarm had been triggered, his freedom was already slipping away. But he wasn't the kind of man to surrender easily, and the officers heading his way had no idea that this was more than a shoplifting call. It was the beginning of something far darker. The patrol car rolled up to the convenience store faster than expected, its headlights washing over the front windows like a sudden spotlight. Inside, the man who had stuffed his backpack with stolen goods stiffened. He had almost made it out, almost slipped away into the night, but the familiar flash of blue and red outside the glass changed everything. He adjusted his jacket again, keeping the heavy object beneath it pressed close to his body, and glanced toward the counter where the clerk tried to look calm while his eyes betrayed unease. The suspect knew the alarm had been tripped, and he had only seconds before the situation escalated. Officer Darren Holt stepped through the sliding doors with the confidence of someone who had walked into 100 similar calls. His boots echoed against the tiles as he scanned the aisles, one hand resting lightly near his belt. He expected resistance, but nothing more than the usual struggle that came with petty theft. He had no way of knowing the man before him wasn't just a thief, but someone armed and already balancing on the edge of panic and aggression. The suspect's eyes locked on him, wide and calculating. He stood near the front, close enough to bolt, but too far to escape unnoticed. The dropped backpack lay near his feet, stuffed with items he no longer cared about. His real focus was survival. Surrender wasn't in his nature, and the thought of prison made his chest tighten. He had been through the system before, and the weight of what he carried under his jacket meant he would not get away with a slap on the wrist this time. The air inside the store thickened. Customers who had been lingering in the aisles noticed the officer and began to drift silently toward the door, slipping outside without drawing attention. Their absence only magnified the tension between the two men. Holt's gaze narrowed as he noticed the suspect's hand pressed firmly against his chest, guarding something. That single detail made alarms ring in his mind, though he kept his voice steady and his pace controlled. The suspect's breathing grew louder, his chest rising and falling as if he were preparing to run or strike. Every exit seemed both an opportunity and a trap. He could try the front door, but the patrol car was still idling just outside. He could dash deeper into the aisles, but that would only corner him. His thoughts flickered between fight and flight, and both choices carried risks. His fingers brushed against the cold handle hidden under his jacket, a reminder that he wasn't unarmed, that he still had leverage if the officer moved in. The clerk stayed frozen behind the counter, torn between fear and fascination. The tension unfolded like a slow-motion disaster, and each second stretched unbearably long. Holt took another careful step forward, studying the suspect's body language, recognizing the twitch of muscles primed to explode into action. The suspect's jaw tightened. His decision was made. He wouldn't surrender, not here, not tonight. The moment snapped like a wire under pressure. The suspect surged forward with sudden violence, his body crashing against Officer Holt with enough force to shove him off balance. The backpack was left behind on the floor as the man lunged toward the exit, his jacket flying open just enough to reveal the jagged blade he had been gripping beneath the fabric. Holt instinctively reached out, grabbing for the suspect's arm, but the knife flashed dangerously close, slashing the air between them. The sharp glint of steel confirmed every suspicion. The shoplifter wasn't simply trying to escape. He was ready to cut his way out. The store erupted into chaos. A stack of snack boxes tumbled to the floor. The sliding doors banged wide as the suspect burst through, and frightened customers scattered into the night. Holt steadied himself, heart pounding, and charged after him. The radio clipped to his shoulder crackled as he called for backup, his voice clipped and urgent. He knew he couldn't let an armed man vanish into the darkness of the neighborhood. Outside, the suspect ran with wild energy, weaving through parked cars in the lot. Tires squealed as drivers tried to steer clear, horns blaring in confusion. He vaulted onto the hood of a sedan, his boots denting the metal, and landed hard on the pavement. His movements were fueled by raw desperation, every step uncoordinated but viciously fast. Holt pursued, his breath sharp in his lungs, the distance between them closing and stretching with every frantic turn. The knife remained in the suspect's hand, gleaming under the glow of street lamps. Each time he glanced back, his eyes carried the look of a cornered animal, reckless, unpredictable, and fully aware of the danger he posed. He slashed at empty space when Holt drew too close, the blade carving through the air as a warning. Shouts rang out from bystanders who ducked behind their vehicles, some fumbling with phones to record or call for help. The lot that had been silent moments ago now throbbed with fear and noise. The chase spilled beyond the convenience store's property and onto the main road. The suspect nearly collided with a cyclist, sending the bike skidding across the pavement. Holt pressed on, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the night as his boots struck hard against the asphalt. The knife was more than a weapon. It was a shield, a way for the suspect to create space and hesitation. Every wild swing forced Holt to slow for a split second, and those moments allowed the suspect to keep moving. The rhythm of the pursuit built toward something inevitable. The man's breath came ragged, his legs pumping with less precision as fatigue began to catch up. Sweat streaked down his face, but his grip on the blade never loosened. Holt knew exhaustion might give him an opening, but he also knew desperation made people unpredictable. Each step brought them closer to a clash that could not be avoided, and neither man was willing to give in first. The sirens multiplied as more units joined the hunt, their flashing lights painting the town in bursts of red and blue. Word traveled quickly, and soon residents knew an armed man was on the run. Doors were bolted, curtains drawn, and streets that were normally alive with evening traffic grew strangely empty. The town had shifted from calm to guarded in a matter of minutes. Patrol cars blocked intersections, and officers combed through side streets with flashlights, while helicopters circled above, their searchlights sweeping across rooftops and alleys. The simple act of stealing from a store had spiraled into a manhunt that gripped the entire community. The suspect left behind a trail of scattered evidence that revealed both his movements and his growing desperation. In one alley, officers discovered the discarded backpack, its zipper torn open, the stolen items spilling onto the ground. Among them lay a bottle cracked against the pavement, its contents soaking into the dirt. Not far away, a smear of blood streaked across a wall where he had scraped his arm in his rush to climb a fence. Every trace told investigators that the man was moving fast, reckless, and becoming more dangerous with each passing moment. Residents in the area began phoning the police with sightings. Some reported hearing footsteps racing across their backyards. Others swore they saw a shadow darting between sheds or slipping into abandoned buildings. Each call brought a surge of adrenaline to the search teams, who spread themselves thinner trying to cover every lead. The fear among the community only deepened as the hours wore on. Parents gathered their children close, and homeowners kept weapons by their doors, dreading the possibility that the fugitive might force his way inside to hide. The suspect himself felt the net tightening. His body ached from the chase, his breath came in sharp bursts, and sweat dripped freely down his face. The knife remained gripped in his hand, the one thing he trusted to keep pursuers at bay. He moved from street to street, ducking behind trash bins, pressing himself against fences, and slipping into shadows whenever headlights swept past. He was trapped in a constant cycle of running and hiding, never resting long enough to think clearly. The more time passed, the more his thoughts turned erratic, shifting between finding an escape route and bracing for the inevitable clash with the police. The search stretched deep into the night, and the sense of unease grew heavier with every minute he remained free. Officers knew the longer he ran, the greater the chance that someone innocent might cross his path. The community, once simply an observer to the chase, now lived with the fear that the fugitive might appear on their street, in their yard, or at their door. It was no longer just a pursuit of one man. It had become a town held hostage by his flight. The night promised no calm until he was caught, and the tension built toward a breaking point that everyone could feel drawing closer. The first hints of dawn spread a faint glow across the horizon, when officers finally caught a break. A construction worker arriving early to the site on the edge of town reported seeing movement among the skeletal frames of half-built houses. Patrol cars converged on the area, their engines rumbling softly as officers moved into position. The wide-open spaces of unfinished roads and towering scaffolding made the site both an opportunity and a danger. There were countless places to hide, but there was also nowhere the fugitive could truly escape once the perimeter closed. At the top of a structure that stood incomplete, the suspect emerged. His silhouette was sharp against the pale morning light, shoulders hunched, the knife still clutched tightly in his hand. Dirt streaked his clothes, his face glistened with sweat, and his movements were ragged with exhaustion, but his defiance remained unbroken. He scanned the floodlights as they clicked on, flooding the site in harsh beams, and the shouts of officers echoed through the steel and wood skeleton of the building. He was surrounded, but his stance made it clear that surrender was not an option he would consider. Down below, Officer Holt stepped forward, his body bruised from the earlier clash, but his resolve unshaken. He had pursued this man across streets, through alleys, and into the night. And he knew the confrontation was about to end here. Every muscle was tensed, ready for the suspect's next move. The distance between them seemed vast, but Holt could feel the charge building in the air, the certainty that the fugitive would not wait to be taken quietly. The suspect descended from the rooftop with reckless speed, his boots clanging against metal beams, his knife flashing as he gripped it with both desperation and fury. Dust clouded around him as he dropped onto the scaffolding, then sprinted down the narrow planks. His chest heaved, his eyes locked forward, and the knife was raised high. He ran not like a man escaping, but like one prepared to strike at whatever stood in his path. The officers formed a line, weapons drawn, voices sharp and commanding, but the suspect only accelerated, his charge fueled by the knowledge that this was the final stand. He barreled down the last stretch of scaffolding and leapt, closing the gap between himself and Holt in an instant. The knife glimmered as it came down in a vicious arc, every ounce of his energy behind it. A single shot cracked through the morning air, echoing across the open construction site. The suspect's body jolted mid-stride, momentum carrying him forward before he collapsed heavily onto the dirt. The knife tumbled from his grip, spinning once before lying still beside him. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of Holt's steady breathing and the distant calls of officers moving in. The long chase that began with stolen goods and a silent alarm ended in one decisive moment. The town that had held its breath through the night could finally exhale, though the memory of the armed man's desperate run would linger long after the sun rose over the quiet streets once again.